Hey, welcome to BJJ Mental Models, episode 102. I'm Matt Kwan. Steve couldn't be with me today, so I'm taking the reins. BJJ Mental Models is your guide to a conceptual and intelligent BJJ approach, and today I have a very special guest, Mr. Shintaro Higashi. So welcome to the show, Shintaro.
Thank you for having me.
So Shintaro is he's an American judoka. He is a 6th degree Dan, coral belt in judo, and he has 2 academies in New York City. One is Kokushi. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, Kokushi Budo Institute.
Kokushi Budo Institute, which is the oldest judo school in New York, if I'm not mistaken, started by his father in, did you say 1963?
Yes, that's correct. 1963.
Awesome. And what was the name of the other school?
Kano Martial Arts.
Kano. So are they both, like you run them both those academies?
Somewhat. We have a head instructor at the Kano Academy. So yeah, I'm not there every day down there in the Chelsea location, but I do poke in, twice a week, 3 times a week, something like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is teaching judo your full-time job, or do you have another job outside of that?
Full-time job, yes.
Awesome. Very cool. And I'm looking at your accomplishments here in competition. It says here that you're a multiple-time national judo champion. You're a 2-time world team member, 2-time All-State Wrestling, NCAA, and Sambo Pan American champion. So definitely involved in many different grappling styles. So that's awesome to see so many crossovers, as well as a BJJ brown belt. So definitely a wealth of knowledge. Are you primarily gi or no gi?
Primarily gi, but I wrestled in college, so that was obviously no gi. I do mix it up a little bit. I think they're both very important, but I spent probably most of my time in gi.
Nice. Do you do a lot of newaza during the week when you're training? Like, what is sort of the breakdown between your standing training and your newaza training?
So I would say, generally, right now everything is shut down still. We can't do group classes in New York City because of the laws. But generally, when things are pumping and regular classes are going on, I would say like a 60-40 split. So we do 40% of the ground, because I do have a little bit of BJJ experience, and I like that stuff also, and I think it's very important. So, but we're primarily a stand-up sort of a thing. That's sort of my expertise.
Do you ever pull guard?
Oddly enough, when I used to go train with some of these guys, it depends on my opponent, right? Sometimes people want to stand and bang, and then I'll give them a little bit of that. But if I really am there to learn jiu-jitsu, or if I'm really there to work and hone on my ground game, there's really no sense in me slamming the person ending up in side position, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I try to, I do pull guard. I go for a bad tomonage so the other person could learn to defend a good tomonage.
Right.
Like a tomonage coming from someone experienced, and now all of a sudden I'm in the bottom position, and my goal obviously is to submit or sweep, and then the top position, and then work from there, right? So yeah, that I do pull guard sometimes. Yeah, I'm ashamed to admit it.
Nothing wrong with being a guard puller.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So do you get to train a lot of no-gi still, or you're just primarily in the gi, I guess?
Not so much. I do a little bit of striking as well, and I guess that's considered no-gi. I know that's not grappling, but I don't train too much no-gi anymore. Probably should. It's good to preserve your hands, right? If you're only doing gi, it's really hard on the hands, so it's nice to mix it up.
That's something I wanted to ask you about too, because as a lifelong judoka, I can't even imagine what your hands must be like. My hands are like pretty mangled up just from the gi game and whatnot. I got pretty knobby looking hands, and my knuckles are all misshaped. What are your hands like right now at this stage in your career?
I do have a little bit of arthritis in my hands, but nothing serious. I think that's a misconception. Like, people think just because I do judo, my hands are really strong. They're not. People think I do a lot of judo because my hand, and my hands would be messed up. But there's a lot of technique behind the gripping, and then how you position your hands, and you're actually not squeezing the gi the entire time, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of technique to that I think gets overlooked that can help you preserve your hands, and so we could definitely talk about that. I know you want to talk a little bit about the gripping stuff. So
yeah, one of the biggest takeaways that I get from your YouTube channel is the idea of gripping and considering your stance. So whether it's righty on righty or right versus left.
Yeah.
And this is something that I've totally overlooked for years. And only when I'm, started watching your channel on YouTube, which is a great resource for information, as well as Travis Stevens's channel. We just had him on the podcast recently. Both you guys have really brought to my attention, like, okay, well, these are sort of the funnels that you can build when you like to stand this way. And, when you're standing this way, these throws are more available than these throws. It seems super fundamental, but it's something that, as mainly a jiu-jitsu fighter, I haven't really thought about too much.
Yeah.
For people in my field, we focus a lot on, okay, how are we going to grip from the guard? Not necessarily in the standing position. So that is definitely something that I wanted to ask you today. I just wanted to mention your father. Am I saying this right? Nobuyoshi Higashi?
Yeah, that's correct. You nailed it. Yeah, Nobuyoshi.
So he also lives in New York with you. And if I'm not mistaken, he traveled to the United States with Katsuo Watanabe to teach judo and aikido.
Yeah, there was a lot. There was a whole slew of the Japanese guys during the pioneering of martial arts, and then there was a bunch of them that came together right around the same time. So Matsumura, right, Yanetsuka, Ogasawara. There was a bunch of them that are really responsible for teaching everyone that's in New York now.
Mm-hmm.
Really, you know what I mean? So not just Watanabe, but in like the 1960s.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So quite the family lineage of judokas, quite impressive. And so you guys are not open right now, eh? But you're on your way to reopening.
No, we're open. So there's a New York City guidelines, right? The city has guidelines for gyms, and we have to consider ourselves a gym because indoor fitness is still not allowed, right?
Right.
So technically we have to go through the inspection process and the application process as a gym. And now we're allowed to do one-to-one sports instruction, which is we provide, in forms of private lessons. And then we also have a 33% capacity independent workout where our athletes can come in and do their own thing. But we're not supposed to provide instruction because then it'll be considered a class, right?
Yeah.
So we've been pretty vigilant about following all the guidelines because, I spoke to the inspector who came, virtually and did the inspection, and they really kind of put a scare into us. They say, hey, we're going to come by unannounced, and if you're violating these things, we're going to shut you down and fine you. So,
Yeah.
We've been compliant for this whole time, so we're still trying to be as compliant as possible, but that has its challenges too, right?
Yeah. New York was hit pretty hard by the coronavirus. I know there's a lot of stuff shut down there. The restrictions are quite a bit more strict than they are up here in Canada, especially in the field I used to be in, cooking. A lot of people that I know don't even have jobs anymore.
Yeah.
Lots of people lost their jobs. And then I know, my professor's professor, Kai Otera, down in San Jose, he had his gym open, and then he got a public warning from the San Jose health officials saying, we've warned you before, and if you open your gym again, we're going to start fining you like $5,000 a day. So some places are definitely more strict than others. And it's sad, I know a few people who have lost their gyms because of what's happened, or they've had to move to a different location. Fortunately, I'm in a pretty small space, so I didn't, I lost money, but I didn't actually lose my entire school. So best of luck to you on the reopening.
Thank you.
On a side note, wondering what's it like in New York right now? Because I hear horror stories of how it's just like it's a ghost town down there. The businesses aren't thriving, and aside from judo, like I know people aren't really training as much as before. But what's like the overall vibe in the city like right now?
Yeah, there's lots of vacancies in the stores, right? If you walk down Broadway, a lot of stores are still closed up. Even on my Chelsea location on 27th Street, the entire block is essentially dead.
Mm-hmm.
Prey and Menjay, they have like a nice little deli on the corner, and they're a pretty big company, and those guys closed down for good, right? And they boarded up their windows, and there's graffiti on it. The pizzeria across the street has closed forever, right? So it's challenging in that neighborhood because there's a lot of office buildings and people used to go into the office and have lunch, but now there's nobody going into the office. So those businesses have been hit very hard.
Yeah.
Upper West Side too. There was a big homeless problem. It's definitely a different city. It's kind of like
feels different, eh? Yeah.
It feels different. Yeah. There's a lot more tension and the restaurants are closing left and right. You could definitely feel sort of, oh man, something is not right here.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people who could afford to leave left. They have houses in the Hamptons or, other places, and they just bounced. So,
Yeah.
it does feel a little bit like a ghost town. But, it's New York City. I think it'll bounce back.
That's good. How does it feel like your overall safety when you're out and about or just walking down the street or with your family?
I don't actually physically live in New York City. I live a little bit north, so I don't really feel the effects of it. But after judo, when I leave the building, there is definitely a little bit more sense of danger, right? So there's a little bit more, and there has been an uptick in crime. So, there's a little bit more, I think, fear
Yeah.
in general. And, judo and jiu-jitsu definitely helps with that,
Yeah.
right? That's why we do it. But, sometimes you just can't help. If there's, 8 people with knives and guns and you don't know what they have, right? Or you get blindsided, or someone can just throw rocks at you and you can't really grapple them, right? So there's definitely fear in the air.
Yeah. Well, to all our listeners and of course you, I hope you get back to the gym and train and do the things you love.
Yep.
But the bulk of the episode I wanted to discuss today was on gripping strategies, specifically gripping strategies in standing positions. And I mean, I don't really know where to begin asking you. I guess maybe stance is something we should discuss, like right versus right or right versus left. So if you were fighting a right versus left situation, would you call that a mirrored stance or what would you call that? I know there's a judo term for that.
Yeah, kenkayotsu, which is fighting fourth something. But yeah, I wouldn't call it a mirrored stance. I know like when I say right versus right, it's mirrored. It's like exactly the same, symmetrical situation.
Okay, so you would refer to mirrored as right versus right or left versus
Yeah,
left.
but the reverse on the mirror, it's like sort of inverse. So I don't know if that's the proper terminology for it. But yeah, the right versus right versus left stuff is very important. And there's a reason for that, right? Especially in judo. I don't think it matters as much in BJJ.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get into that too.
Yeah, it's played a little bit differently. The stand-up game in jiu-jitsu, because of the leg grabs and the submission attempts and the fact you straight up you can just jump guard.
Yeah,
It changes the posture of fighters in jiu-jitsu for sure.
a little bit. Yeah.
I notice in judo, fighters are standing more straight up, not worried about getting leg grabbed, not worried about someone, necessarily jumping closed guard on them. But in jiu-jitsu, you got to worry about that. You got to consider shots. You got to consider guard pulling.
Yeah.
And so I find that your stance tends to be a lot more cautious, I guess, and bent over. So when you say right versus right, you're referring to the right foot being forward, correct?
Yeah, lead leg right. And the important thing about that sort of thing when you're talking about grip fighting is you have 2 arms, right, to control the opponent's body.
Right.
And you have a lapel hand and a sleeve hand generally.
Mm-hmm.
And the lapel hand generally controls the opponent's posture, right? So that's the posture hand, and you have the sleeve hand, which is the pulling hand, right?
Right. So you could be a right-handed fighter, be like, so you play with your right leg lead. And does it matter how your hands grip? Like, could you use your right or your left hand to grab the collar? Or is there kind of if you're a right foot forward, you generally grab with your right hand on the collar?
It's a very good question. It depends on what you're trying to do. And so the basics of judo, if you're looking at right side versus right side, and I like the terminology right side as opposed to right-handed, because you can be right-handed taking a left-sided stance, right? It really is all about in which direction you turn. So if you're right versus right and you're turning to your left, right? If you're leading with your right and you turn to your left for your big turn throws, right? You're naturally closer to that side because you're leading with the right.
Yeah.
It's much shorter turn to that direction to your dominant side than to your weak side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the name of the game. And in judo, you develop these turn throws over years and years and years, and it takes a long time to develop. But once you develop it, you throw your entire body in a spiraling motion to one side, right? Think like baseball players, they train to swing the bat in one direction, or football players learn to throw the ball with their right hand if they're right-handed, right? So now all of a sudden, you're not going to switch sides and throw to the side that you're not used to. You never see a baseball player standing lefty all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same sort of idea. So when I'm taking that right side versus right side stance and I want to throw to my dominant side, I have a sleeve hand, and that's the side that I'm going to turn towards.
Right.
Now, if you as a right-sided athlete also, we're turning into each other, right? We're opposing turns. So if you could control my right hand, which is the posture hand, and if you could pin it to my body, it prevents that turn to my dominant side.
Yep, I follow you. You're talking about a right versus right situation.
Exactly. So there's two sort of levels of this fighting for position stuff. There's grip fighting, and then once you've been interlocked with each other, there's that adjusting for position fighting, right? So there's grip fighting, positional fighting, and then the advantages get sort of established, and then you're sort of doing judo, right? And you're developing your strategy based on that.
Right.
If you think about it in terms of BJJ, because I know most of your followers are BJJ, correct?
Yeah, I say that's safe to say.
Right. So if I'm standing in open guard, right? If I'm standing and you're on the ground in your open guard, there's a million different things you can do, right? Shin to shin, try to force ashigarami, you could go de la hiva, right? You could do lots of different things. I don't know. There's limitless amount of options that you have, right? But if I could gain advantage by passing your guard, now you can't do de la hiva. Now you can't go shin to shin. Now you can't go ashigarami.
Mm-hmm.
So now all of a sudden your options are limited, and now you're in defensive mode.
Right.
You want to return me back to neutral, which is inside your guard.
That's right.
And in grip fighting and adjusting for position, it's the same exact way. It's the equivalent of gaining advantage by passing the guard, right? If I could shut down your lapel hand, cut that hand completely, and have dominant posture hand right by your collar, now I've shut down all your offenses to your dominant side. Now you don't have an offense, period, right? If I'm completely controlling that sleeve, you can't shoot in on the legs either.
Mm-hmm.
So now all of a sudden I'm in offense mode and you're in defense mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why the game gets focused on the throwing and the techniques and the combination, but most of the game happens at the guard passing level, right? Which is the grip fighting and the adjusting for position.
Yeah, one thing about jiu-jitsu that's come to light recently is actually a guy, maybe you've heard of him. He lives in New York. His name's Gordon Ryan. He's like he's the Wayne Gretzky right now of no-gi grappling, considered to be like the greatest and still super young. It's actually kind of sad seeing someone so young being so good and so accomplished already. But this guy, him and Danaher, they talk about offensive and defensive cycles. And essentially, this translates when we're talking about guard passing in the example that you just used. It's like, well, if they're grabbing you or gripping you from the bottom position, and so let's say you're passing the guard and they're gripping you and off balancing you, they're the one in the offensive cycle, you're in the defensive cycle because you're constantly getting off balanced.
Yeah.
But if you're able, from the top position, if you're able to put pressure on your opponent so that they can frame rather than grip in a defensive motion, then you're the one in the offensive cycle. So this was kind of it's a great way for guard players and guard passers to sort of realize, okay, when am I leading the charge and when am I on the defensive?
Yeah.
And you mentioned advantages, which is, I'd actually never heard the term advantage used in a judo context the way you do. And in jiu-jitsu, when we say advantages, we generally refers to like a near score. So maybe I throw you, never going to happen. I throw you and your butt hits the ground and then you scramble back to your feet, right? Or I grab your pants, I pass your knee line, but then you bring your knees back in and you reguard. So I would get an advantage. Or maybe I had a juji and it's extended and then you escape and you get on top and you get out. So I would get like a near score. But when you say advantage in judo, I notice in your videos, like you mentioned, there's kind of the grip fighting aspect where, you fight for grips, then you establish your grips, and then you mention, okay, now I'm going to get an advantage. And it's basically kind of like a really subtle adjustment on your grip. And I'm not sure how you define that. From what I can see, you mentioned like your collar hand, you want to have it higher than their collar hand.
Generally, yeah.
So you do like a shrug almost,
yeah.
And then you try and get your hand higher into like a power grip, like we call it a horse collar grip or a behind the back grip.
So if you look at it in terms of a sliding scale, like on a spectrum, right? If we're linked up right versus right, we're just standing upright. You have your hand on my collar, I have my hand on your collar, and we have sleeve and sleeve. We're completely in the same exact position. That's 50-50, right?
Yeah.
If I could slide your hand down slightly, and if I could raise my hand a little bit higher, my lapel hand, now I have a slight advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you could keep making it extreme and extreme and extreme and make the net a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger until ultimately I could cut that hand, and now you don't have any hold of my collar whatsoever. Right. So now I'm in completely dominant position. I'm fully 100% dominant towards me because now I have two hands on and you have one hand on.
Yeah. And you can turn the shoulders too, right? Like that's a big part of gaining the advantage as well, is sort of like affecting the line of their shoulders. and twisting their spine?
That's more so right side versus left side. So the strategy for right versus left is completely different.
Okay.
And this is also based because of the turn throw situation. Now, if you took all like super powerful, massive turn throws out of the equation, you're only looking at tomonage, leg grabs, and things like this, then it's not going to really matter so much, right? But because of the nature of judo, it really does matter. The context of the techniques really matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like the same options won't be available if you're righty and you're fighting a right-sided player. That's totally different from if you're right and you're fighting a left-sided player.
Yes, that's right. And also, like for instance, I did another video with BJJ Fanatics, low risk judo for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighters. And that is entirely about don't even bother learning turn throws if you're doing BJJ.
Because just back exposure and whatnot, neck exposure.
Yeah, back exposure. It just takes a very long time to learn, right? And then if you don't have the time to focus on your stand-up, you're never going to get good at it.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do anything that you're not going to get good at, but if your main game is groundwork, you want to develop your takedown style that's going to help you maximize your groundwork, right?
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden you're spending 70% of your time working turn throws to develop this thing 3 years later. It's going to affect your ground game as well, right? Which is not going to help. If you're a jiu-jitsu guy, you're first and foremost playing guard. You're playing groundwork. So you want to maximize that. So if you're trying to learn that system, which is mostly like Kochi Ochi, inside trip, Tomonage Sumi Gaeshi, and then the combination thereof using some grip fighting strategies, now all of a sudden turning the shoulders and stuff, it doesn't matter so much because the turn aspect of the techniques are sort of taken out of it. It still matters, gripping and positional advantage and stuff, because when I'm completely dominant, I am restricting your movement. I control your sleeve right side versus right side, which means you can't shoot in on the leg with that, right? You can't connect your hands for a single because I'm controlling that sleeve.
Yeah.
And because I'm controlling your collar hand, you have no control over my posture.
Right.
But I have my right hand on your collar, therefore I control your posture, I control your hands. Now I could do anything and everything, right? I could go for an easy arm drag, go for a snap down, a sort of outside trip. I could go for an ankle pick because I have control of your collar and your head, right? But you can't go for an ankle pick.
Right. Because you could dominate the posture as well, right? If you have two hands, I can't really do anything.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the idea, right? If I could go 2-on-1, and this is a great example, the crossover between BJJ and judo. Like if you have my back, right? If you have my back and you're in the crab ride position, if you could clip one of my legs, so you could have two hands versus one defending hand going for that rear naked choke, that's a huge advantage, right? Wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah.
If you have a body triangle and you have trapped one of my arms in there, right? I'm not getting out of that.
No.
Same idea with the stand-up. If I have two hands on and I'm controlling your posture and you have one hand on, that's going to be a winning position. So the game really, really begins at the gripping and the positional level before it even goes into, learning the throws. And people always focus on osotogari or any type of technique that they see online. They drill it over and over and like, what am I doing wrong? I can't hit this in a live roll. That's because there's just so many different checklist items before you even go for the throw, right? That you're not even, unless you're bigger and stronger than the person, then you can just do anything you want, really, right?
Right. Yeah, this was kind of something that I ran into is with my old judo coach. We would do bunch of uchikomi, and I'm like, hey, I'm really feeling this throw now. Like I can hit it when I'm doing uchikomi. Okay, let's do some randori now, and just like nowhere near where I need to be able to make the throw happen. Even if I know what the throw is, I couldn't put it in context. I wasn't really thinking about grip battling and how I'm going to dominate the grip battle. I didn't know my stance relative to his stance, what I should be looking for. And that's when watching your channel really helped me sort of put things into context and be able to I should be standing a particular way. Like one thing I did for a long time is I would just grip in such a way that it wasn't like I wouldn't even consider my stance. So sometimes I would be standing right foot forward. Sometimes I'd be standing left foot forward.
Yeah.
Not that that's really wrong, but I just wouldn't know what attacks were available to me
Yeah.
And I was just kind of floundering. And then at one point he's like, hey man, like, why don't you just pick a side? Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend trying to be ambidextrous in this situation. You kind of need to develop your foundation first, figure out which leg you like to lead with, and then what you can do from there. So that was like
Yeah.
it's just me just basically not knowing where I need to be.
Yeah. But that approach is not wrong, right? So I have this systematic approach to position and grip fighting and stuff, but that's not always the right answer. A lot of teachers who have been doing this stuff for a very long time, they have that old school mindset of like, you're developing your techniques first and you're building your strategy around it, right? There's people who just go in there and you're leading right sometimes, you're leading left sometimes. And there's people who just go out there and are capable of improving, especially like super high level athletes who are just unbelievably athletic. They can get away with stuff like that, right? There are people out there from Japan who's so unbelievably good and dynamic at the techniques themselves that they don't really care about position, because even if they're losing in position, they could still force a massive, massive throw,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they developed their whole lives to turn in that direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So none of these methodologies is really wrong. You really just got to sort of look at the athlete, right, and see what resonates with them. And I like my system because you could be a smaller person, not as athletic, and still implement some of the stuff. And the good analogy that I always sort of give to my athletes, like, if you take a 9-year-old child who you outweigh by 100 pounds, technique doesn't matter. You could just knock them over, right?
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with me or you, who've been training most of our lives, go against like a gorilla or a bear or something. It doesn't really matter because we're going to get mauled, right? No
Yeah.
matter how much technique that we have, so there are limitations, physical limitations. I think it really does matter. If the person outweighs you by 20, 30 pounds, you never want to be linked up 50-50. But it's sort of always, I like to say, it's like on a spectrum, and it's better to know it than not know it, I think.
Yeah. If you're a righty versus righty,
Yeah.
what is kind of your go-to strategy and combination? Like, let's say the match just started. We have not
Yeah.
made grips yet,
Yeah.
because I know some people, they will take especially in jiu-jitsu, I find a lot of the time the collar is kind of the first thing people grab. But then I saw a video from, I think Travis posted it, and it said, if you go for the collar doesn't move really,
Yeah.
but the sleeve is what can be difficult to track down. If your partner doesn't want you to grab their sleeve, their hands can move. So what he was saying is, he sometimes will implement a game where he tries to grab the sleeve first, because then if he can track down the sleeve, then the collar grip is much easier to grab, and then you already have your throwing grips. I don't know. I just
Yeah.
wanted to get your perspective on that.
That's a great, great, great question. And that's the right question. If I'm standing right side versus right side, if I'm like facing you directly, right?
Yeah.
Option number one, always, if I could take my left hand and control your right sleeve,
Yeah.
that's the best, right?
Yeah.
And that's always option number one. That's the first thing I always go for. Now, because I have short turn throws to my left. So I have short dominant side throws with that sleeve. And then I could also go for the arm drag. And if I want to, I could take my right hand and shoot in on that lead leg, right? Because now I control that lead arm,
Yeah.
right? So that's always option number one. Option number two is I can't get that sleeve and I post on your lapel, the wrong side lapel, right? So I take my left hand, I went for that sleeve, I can't get it. I don't retreat my hand, I go immediately to that collar,
Right.
right? I punch that left hand in. Now, I still could turn to my right side. I could still shoot in on that lead leg, but you cannot because I've stopped that shoulder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you have the same options too, because you're right side versus right. We're both in the same position, right? So my right hand, my lead leg is in defense mode. So I'm trying not to let you get my right sleeve, and I'm also protecting that lapel, because sleeve, lapel with your left hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my right hand's on defense, my left hand's on offense.
Right.
So stab, 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 defend, defend, defend. And if you're capable of doing these two things independently and being aware of both things simultaneously, now you're getting to real high level stuff.
Yeah, and something I've watched from your videos is, so if you're standing right foot forward, you lead with your left hand. You grip with your left hand, not your right one, right?
That's correct. That's correct. And even if you're doing BJJ, if you stick your right hand out straight, you're going to shoot in on that leg.
Yeah, you leave your leg sort of open, right?
Yeah.
In wrestling, people call that the gatekeeper, right? Like the hand that sort of guards the knee.
Yes. lead leg guards the leg, and then the backhand goes and posts on the shoulder or goes forces that collar tie.
Okay. Do you follow the same methodology like, when you're a right-sided fighter fighting a lefty, or would you lead? Would you start grabbing with your right hand in that case?
Right versus left, I do the complete opposite, where I start with my right hand and try to get the collar hand on first.
So if it's right versus left, you will have your right foot forward and you're gripping with your right hand.
Yes, yes. And then because the person who puts their hand on first determines inside or outside position,
Right.
right? Because my right collar hand and your left hand are going to be linked in a configuration where one person has inside and one person has outside position, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then people always say inside is better, but that's not necessarily true, right? It depends on what your strategies are from the outside position. You can still gain advantage from the outside position, right? If I only like the outside and if I got the inside, I'm not going to know what to do, right? So it's not one is better than the other, really. Generally, if someone's taller than me, taller person might say, I like going on the outside, I go on the inside. Now we don't have to fight for inside position,
Yeah.
right? It's really a matter of preference and a matter of game. So now once you've established that lapel hand in the right side versus left side position, now you're looking to create a strong post, fight for that sleeve, and then turn the shoulders, right? That's really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that shoulder turn doesn't really matter if you don't do a lot of turn throws, right?
In jiu-jitsu, like you mentioned, I guess with your instructional, doing big turn throws in jiu-jitsu is not necessarily I don't want to say it's not a good idea, but it's more prone to risk. This is one thing. I don't know if you saw Danaher released an interview that he did with Bernardo Faria, and there's a short clip about, the main problems of takedowns in jiu-jitsu. And he had a lot of great examples. Like one of them was considering how you expose your back when you throw. So like an Ippon Seoinage, how you could expose your belt when you go for a takedown. So if I go for a single on you, sometimes I give you belt exposure.
Yeah.
And another example, like if I did a drop Seoinage, I give you neck exposure. So these are all things that we have to consider when there's submissions and all, leg grabs and things like that involved. I found a really helpful video. So maybe I'll have to check out your instructional because that sounds like it would be pretty valid for a jiu-jitsu fighter. I find when I'm going in jiu-jitsu that I really like to mix up, like it's something I'm not very good at, but I've been playing with it more, is mixing in my ashiwaza, because it's relatively low risk and it can create, off balance and force your opponent to stumble. And it's almost like you can use it almost like a jab, just to get them moving.
For sure. Hey, you said you wrestled, right?
I mean, I do wrestle in training. I don't have a wrestling background. I wrestled in middle school a little bit.
Nice.
And then I stopped and played hockey. I wish I'd stayed with it, but
Yeah.
I'm not like like I can wrestle, but I'm not like a wrestler by trade. I usually pull.
Gotcha. So when you're in dominant position, right side versus right side or something like that, a lot of the times when it comes to jiu-jitsu stuff, I think the snap down is one of the most underutilized skill when it comes to right in the gi.
Mm-hmm.
Snap downs are great because then you're breaking their posture, you create that upward reaction, and then you can shoot in, right?
And you would do that with the left hand? If you're a right-sided player, you're snapping down with the left hand?
Well, it depends if they're right or if the opponent's standing left.
Oh, yeah, you're right. No, and I guess if it was right versus right, my left hand would be grabbing for the sleeve, right?
Yeah, but then if I have a higher position where I have my hand right behind your neck, like in the C5 grip, where the vertebrae is, right? And if I have that hand completely cut off, I control your posture, but you don't control mine because you don't have a hand on my collar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then forcing a turn from there probably is not the right move. I could physically just start snapping your head down to the floor, down to the floor, down to the floor, right?
Yeah.
There's really not much you can do about it, So I think that's one of the most underutilized thing. If you could just fight for a hand position, get really good at gripping, and just learn how to snap the person down really hard, you're already, have a huge advantage there, right? You're already ahead of the game. So, yeah, adjusting for jiu-jitsu rules, it's a huge thing. And, learning how to do a tomoe-nage or something like that is great because if you have me beat in standing grip fighting position, I could just go for tomoe-nage. This is what I tell to all my jiu-jitsu people that come to my judo school. Obviously, not many guys are coming now because of the COVID, but before we used to have a slew of BJJ guys coming to train judo at my school. Like Bernardo Faria was there for like a year.
Yeah.
And what I would tell every single one of those guys is, if you're in training, you're gonna pull guard. just go for a sumi or a tomoenage anyway. Just go for it.
Yeah.
Try to throw them with tomoenage. That way you at least get the reps in to learn. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
If you
If
get
you hit it, you hit
dominated,
it. If not, you end up in your guard.
exactly, you're going to pull guard anyway. So why just pull guard as opposed to getting your repetitions in for tomoenage? Tomoenage over sumi, tomoenage you could do a little bit more safer, I think.
Yeah.
And it's good for your opponent too.
A little bit less sacrifice throw.
Yeah, if I have a lot of exposure, like if me and you rolled for the next 3 months, and if every time you wanted to pull guard, you went for tomoenage, you get to increase your tomoenage skill set, obviously, by learning the timing and all this stuff. And I get to work on my tomoenage defense every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So I could exponentially get better. And then we could fight for position. And if I beat you right side versus right side and I get in dominant position, I'm going to start snapping you down. So in order to escape the snap downs and escape the throws, you're going to go tomoenage as a bailout technique, therefore transitioning the match to the ground. And I've worked on my tomoenage defense. It really is a win-win for you all around, as opposed to we bow, you touch my gi and you sit down, which there's zero value to that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And of course, you spend 15 seconds, 10 seconds of every match now fighting for position and then working on that tomoenage. But 15 seconds, if we're doing a 5-minute roll, it's a very short amount of time. We're going to still spend our time training on the ground, which is what we're ultimately there for if we're doing BJJ, correct?
Yeah.
So it's a very high yielding thing that you can do if you're already a jiu-jitsu player, as opposed to trying to come in and learn a turn throw, which you're going to be spending the next 30, 40 minutes on. That's not really going to give you the best yields.
Yeah, that's one thing that Danaher talks about in that video is it's like certain throws are, of course, they're more risky, but also certain turn throws tend to be more dynamic. There's a lot more room for like following through and actually possibly ending up on the bottom. So it's good to select throws where you're not, even if you get an ippon like in judo, if you end up on the bottom, you still win in a lot of cases. But in jiu-jitsu, if you end up on the bottom, it's like, now the match has only begun and you're in a horrible position, right? And at best you get an advantage.
Yeah.
So that was a good point as well. Kind of be selective.
But the follow through, I think that's the one thing that I sort of disagreed with because I've listened to that too, and I'm in martial arts, so people talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
You could train yourself to go for massive turn throws and not get rolled through.
Right.
In my early days of wrestling, I had that problem. Every time I threw someone, I overthrew them, and then I got rolled through, and I actually ended up losing points.
So what do you do? Just kill your own momentum?
Yeah. So as the person's going over, you drop your hips to the floor, right?
Okay.
And think if you can. The person goes, this is the hard part about it though, training it as you're dropping your hips or as you're dropping your weight on top of them to sort of crush them, you have a very high risk of injuring the person's ribs.
Yeah.
Right?
It's happened to me.
Coming down on top of the person as their back hits the floor. So it's kind of a tricky thing to train, but you could definitely train yourself to not get overturned, right? Because you see these massive turn throws in international wrestling, which is huge. It's a very, very big sport. People have been doing it for a very long time. People throw each other to their back without getting over rotated all the time. So you could definitely, it's a skill set that you can train, So yeah, you drop the hips, you go cross body control, you land on the ribs, and then you could sort of, adjust from there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah, just my 2 cents.
I'm a shorter guy, so I like I gravitate naturally more towards Seoinage. I feel like I can get low and get into that space. And it's just kind of the throw that I've naturally gone for. But big turn throws like Uchimata and things like that, I have issues finishing Uchimata, especially on someone who's like taller than me.
Yeah.
But I use it to set up the mule kick into the ankle pick, like really basic wrestling sequences. So I definitely see like I use it more to make my opponents stumble. And then from there, I sort of chain things together. But I very rarely go for like big dynamic throws.
Yeah.
And another reason, something Danaher mentioned, it's like, well, if you invest tons of time into these big turn throws, and I mean, even just like throws in general, and then 95% of the guys you fight in competition just pull guard, you're kind of, the rules don't require that you become proficient in these skills. So a lot of people neglect them, and therefore you're kind of wasting time if you're investing all this time in it. It's more so at the
Yeah.
the higher weight classes, and honestly more in the masters divisions where you'll see two guys actually agree
Yeah.
to stand and try and take each other down.
It's true. It's true. I would love to see that rule change in BJJ. And if you made the rule change in judo to keep the match going for longer on the ground and you get penalized for giving up your back by going for a shitty throw, I think the sports would look a lot more similar to each other than,
Yeah.
I think that they should do that both, right? And I'm not saying to merge sports, but that I would like to see that, because judo is missing a little bit in terms of the groundwork. Even though some diehard judo people are like, no, our groundwork is fine. It's not as refined, and same with BJJ with the stand up.
Totally agree.
Their stand up is not as refined too because you get 2 points. That's it. And the thing is, if you sit guard, you don't have to risk losing those points or even going for those points because you sit guard and things continue as normal, right? Points are still 0-0. So why take that risk? And the person on the bottom has an advantage because if they sweep them, they get points, and you're on top, and then you could pass. And now all of a sudden you racked up, 2 scoring opportunities as opposed to the person on top can really only score one way by passing the guard.
Yeah. And
right?
passing the guard in a high level jiu-jitsu competition's so difficult. It's like one of the most difficult things you can do, right?
Yeah, I bet.
Especially when like we mentioned, not a lot of people are, well, I don't want to say not a lot, but many people in the jiu-jitsu community don't really practice takedowns because there's no requirement for them to. So what does that mean? They focus their effort on their guard, which makes it even harder to pass their guards, right? So
yeah, it makes sense, man. It makes sense. If I was competing full time in BJJ, I probably wouldn't learn to, work on my takedowns either, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the win conditions, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a very important skill to learn. I think the beauty of the stand-up throwing too, in a self-defense application standpoint, is like if you could take a single leg and you're on the subway and you take someone down, and now all of a sudden you're trying to pass their guard, and you have upper body control with a crossface, they could have a friend that's going to come in and stop you in the face.
Exactly.
Right? That's always a thing. If you have the ability to be upright and then just slam someone, right, and then end it then and there, then you could take on the next person and the next person. So I think there really is merit to learning it, not just in the sports setting, but from a self-defense standpoint. But that's why I'm such a big fan of the crossover training, right? Because there's things you could gain from each martial art, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, things that will work in wrestling don't necessarily work against someone who when you have a jacket on, just because a simple grip could shut down, double leg takedowns or single leg takedowns. So
yeah.
That is also an important thing as an instructor to consider when you're teaching a no-gi class or a gi class, is like, hey, is this technique applicable for the style that I'm teaching? This is also something that Danaher mentions in that episode there.
Then you just got to carry around an extra jacket, every time you get in an altercation. It's like, hey, man, can you put this on real quick?
Exactly. I wanted to ask you, just like physically, we've talked about right versus left, and sort of, which hand to grip with first. I just wanted to maybe briefly talk about, like, physically when you're gripping the jacket, like any details or special things. Like, I know a lot of judo fighters, when they grab the collar with the bottom 3 fingers, and the thumb and the index finger aren't really used to grab as much, but more just, it's the bottom 3 fingers that grab, stuff like that. Is that something that you use a lot?
Yeah, I do. I use the forefinger a lot too to pick the lapel open so I could get a nice bite on that thumb. That's something that I do. It's very nuanced. No one really teaches it, especially in a right versus left setting.
Yeah.
Right? When you're reaching for that lapel and the lapel is flush to the chest because it's flat.
Yeah.
You see a lot of people reaching over, especially if we've already established, right? Like, I like inside and you like the outside position. And then we both aren't fighting for that same inside position. We're going to want to just put our hands on the gi right away. Right? Because we both know what we want. It's already been established. And in that case, right, turning that hand just so you fish that thumb into that lapel is very tricky. So you just literally, pick at it with the front finger, and then you pull that lapel vertically towards you. And it sounds crazy, but you see it all the time. No one really talks about it. You know what I mean?
When would you differentiate using the bottom 3 fingers to grip as opposed to the whole fist? Like, if the lapel isn't, if it's not pulled out, it's not applicable, you use the full fist? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying if the lapel is flat on your chest, in order to get a good grip, to activate my bottom three, I'll use that forefinger to pull that lapel open, and then I'll hook the three fingers underneath that lapel that I just pulled open towards me. And then once I establish that grip, then it's mostly the bottom three and the thumb.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're not really squeezing the gi. That's what the beginners do a lot. If you think about like if me and you were, hanging out at a lake and it's like, yo, let's see who could throw this rock the farthest, right? And we're playing that game, you're not squeezing that rock really hard. You probably have a very, very loose grip on that rock, correct?
Yep.
In order to maximize your throwing potential. And judo is the same way. A lot of people think you're squeezing the gi. It makes it very difficult to go in and be very athletic and be very, very loose with your movements if you're squeezing that lapel or even holding onto that sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
Another example, if I'm holding onto that sleeve hand and if I'm squeezing real tight and pulling real tight, now all of a sudden, any movement that you yank that hand away from me, that's going to put tremendous amount of tension on my fingers,
Yeah.
right? Puts tension on my elbow, my shoulder. I feel it throughout the entire body, right? Because it's like a kinetic chain from my hand grabbing that gi all the way up to my core and my legs, right? So now all of a sudden, if you yank that hand away from me, but I have a very loose hook fingered grip, and if I just limp that arm forward, you're just going to be essentially pulling into thin air. There's no resistance to create tension on the fingers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I have to sort of use that without also understanding that you may go for a turn throw and you may try to set me up or something like this. But that kind of stuff where you stuck your fingers onto that gi, but you're moving with the opponent, not constantly resisting or squeezing, that really helps you preserve the hands, right? And it helps you sort of maximize your judo.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing in jiu-jitsu too, is we try and not get married to grips where, if you have their collar and they have a 2-on-1 on your hand, they're about to break that grip. Rather than just squeezing as hard as you can and then taking damage to your fingers, it's almost better if you can re-grip and know where you're going to put your hand next, rather than I'm just going to take this grip and hold on to it as hard as I can.
Yeah.
So we use that same sort of thinking in jiu-jitsu. What about the way when you're grabbing the sleeve? Because I've seen people take grips on the bottom where the seam is, and sort of flare the palm down.
Yeah.
I've seen grips, as I've seen in videos where you grip like kind of on top of the forearm, like halfway up by the elbow, like almost on an on top grip. I've seen grips where guys take that grip and then they fold the thumb to the inside so that they use the thumb as a frame on top. Sort of, can you sort of explain to me your ideas, how you would grip the sleeve?
Yeah. So again, this always goes back to you have to ask the question, am I fighting right side or left side, right? Because the goal of the sleeve hand is different.
Okay.
If I'm fighting right side versus right side, if I could cut that hand and be in completely dominant position, it's in my best interest for you not to re-grab that lapel. So I'm going to essentially take your hand and try to put it in your own pocket, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have to maximize my hand position to be able to apply that sort of pressure. And if I'm pushing downward at an angle as if I was doing like a decline bench press, I'm probably the strongest, right? In order to do a proper decline bench press, I need to sort of create a handle that's going to sort of reinforce that pushing motion. So that's going to be the way I grip that sleeve.
On top.
On top, yeah, where I pull the gi to the side to collect more material with my hands. That way there's a much tighter band across the top of the wrist.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine if you grip kind of halfway up the arm as opposed to at the end of the sleeve, then your pull has a bit more. You can create a bigger pull because it's not as wide. Am I correct in saying that?
You're definitely on the right track, right? So depending on if I'm fighting right side versus right side, me and you, where I grab on the sleeve, whether it's low sleeve or mid sleeve, really depends on what my advantages are, what the sort of the positions that I want to force. I'm a little bit heavier than you. Actually, I'm very heavier than you. So being close to 50-50 doesn't really scare me because I'm heavier than you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me to fight you in this judo setting where I outweigh you, I don't need to completely cut that hand and be fully dominant, which means that I could go a little bit higher on the elbow and I could just try to pin that sleeve to your lat.
Yeah.
Right. But if in your case, you're going to want to cut that sleeve completely off because you don't want me controlling your lapel and I outweigh you by a lot. Therefore, you're going to probably try to grab lower on the sleeve to be able to cut the sleeve off completely. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that really matters. And you're right. If you're grabbing lower on the sleeve, there's a lot more slack. You have to pull much longer of a ways in order to off balance me forward, right? But if you're a Seoinage player, like what you said you are, the best thing you could do is go low on the sleeve, cut that hand, and then now all of a sudden when you pull this arm forward, there's this huge space underneath. And then you could fit your entire body underneath me, and that should sort of be your strategy, right? So you never really want to go high elbow if if you're a lighter person who has a Seoinage game.
Mhm. Do you prefer Seoinage grabbing with the pulling hand being on the sleeve or the lapel? Because a lot of the time I prefer in Ippon Seoinage with my hand actually on the outside position with the lapel being my pulling hand.
Yeah. So with the Ippon Seoinage, you have to know when to go for it, right? And I think there's two general times to go for it. It always has to be in conjunction with your grip fighting strategy. So if you're fighting right side versus right side, you're going for the sleeve, you can't get it. Option two is getting that lapel,
Right.
right? Getting that lapel, not the control posture lapel, but the opposite side lapel, right? So now we're talking about your left hand on my right lapel. In that situation, my fear is that you throw your right hand over, control my posture, and then switch down to the sleeve. Right now, all of a sudden, you're fully dominant in the right side versus right side setting. That's my fear, so it's in my best interest to prevent that right hand from coming over the back, right?
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, I need to defend that by posting hand to bicep or bringing my left hand up, and then you misdirect coming over the back, and then you go Ippon Seoinage.
Right. Yeah, that's when I saw that. I saw Travis show that setup where you kind of, it's almost like you're what do you call that? I refer to that as a power grip or a horse collar grip. What do you guys call that in judo? The grip where it comes over the back.
Yeah, power grip, right? And then there's degrees to it. If you go really, really far down, then you sort of go in like over under position almost. And then if you go towards the opposite shoulder, we call that the Georgian grip.
Georgian, yeah.
Yeah, but that stuff is a whole different strategy when it comes to that.
Yeah, it's kind of a whole different position on its own. I don't play with it too much. And I think it's because so many of those throws are really dynamic from there, and I think more low risk.
It always benefits the bigger person too if you go Georgian grip or hip to hip, because
And I'm not big.
let's face it, yeah. So I mean, the closer we are in proximity, the more I have an advantage using my weight. All I got to do is stick my leg out and throw my body to the floor. I have a lot more mass going in that one direction than you have mass going in any other direction. So that's the danger of the George. I would stay away from that.
Yeah. So you say, let's say we're right on right. I go for your sleeve with my left hand and you pull it away. So now I'm transitioning off to the collar. That setup you mentioned where the right hand goes to the power grip, you sort of show it, but then you swim underneath and go Ippon Seoinage. That's one of my favorite setups there. And just that detail of like showing the power grip to create a reaction and then coming underneath, that one's been really successful for me.
I'm gonna make one even better for you. Now your game is gonna be forever changed. So if you could picture that same exact position, you have that hand posted on that lapel from the backside, right? Your left hand posted.
Yeah.
You're making it look like you're gonna go over the back. You have Ippon Seoinage, and then every now and then you're showing it, right? Over the back, Ippon Seoinage, over the back, Ippon Seoinage. You fake it with your hand, and now all of a sudden you open that lapel and you feed that lapel to your right hand, so you have two hands on that one collar.
Yeah.
And then you could snap the person down real hard because now you have two hands controlling that one collar.
Yeah.
And the opponent's thinking either Ippon Seoinage is coming, which means he's going to drop his hips, or the hand over the back is coming, which means he has his hand wide open. He's not really thinking about his posture so much. Great opportunity to snap the person down.
Yeah.
Right. And then once the person's recovering from that, you could go obviously collar drag, arm drag, Ippon Seoinage, or the back thing. So now you've also already added like another two dimensions to this game of yours, right?
It sounds like you're setting up a dilemma where it's like there's multiple options and your opponent's constantly off balanced.
Yes.
So if you do that and you have that 2-on-1 on the far collar there, and you go to snap down, would you simply just move away and snap down, or would you circle to a particular direction and snap down? Are all options viable?
So if you're leading with your right leg, right, and then I have that the collar that's closest to me with two hands on, if I go straight down, I'm sort of pulling you into that leg.
Yeah.
So it really depends, and there's no guarantee that leg is going to be there or not be there, especially if you're reacting to my Ippon Seoinage, right? You might pull that leg back or you might do something else. But generally, if you want to snap the person down, you want to snap them down at a tangent, like a 90-degree angle away from their base.
Right. So if I'm right-handed and I have a 2-on-1 on your, it's my left, your right lapel, would you say you'd circle to the right then?
You could circle to the left to pull me towards my natural weak side, or you could circle around to create an angle going towards my back because back exposure is huge in jiu-jitsu, right? And then if you have that angle, you're much more closer to a collar drag to go for the takedown. So just snapping me down straight front and onward, it might be difficult. But if you're faking an Ippon Seinagi and then I brace my legs in a way where I'm sort of in this even parallel stance now, going straight down towards your legs, it's going to be a good one too.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a little bit of experimenting, but I will go, right side, left side. I would circle, snap the person down, and then I might dive in for a Nippon Seinagi. Or the beauty of this is you could just shoot it on a leg.
Yeah.
Sat down, shooting on a leg, and that'll probably, yeah, it's just such a great, and it all starts with you taking that initiative and having that one hand on first.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, yeah, if you try and grab the sleeve and you avoid it, you move away, you just immediately take a grip on the lapel, right?
Yeah. And then the whole time, the most important factor of all this is that your right hand has to be defending that backside. Because if I reach out and grab that sleeve, now everything we talked about is gone. If I reach out and grab that lapel, now everything we just talked about it is gone.
Yeah.
Right.
So what am I doing with my right hand? Parrying?
Exactly. So you have your thumb on the outside of the collar, right? That's where you're camping out, ready to parry.
Yeah.
And every time the person goes for that sleeve, you pull the entire body away. You turn that body.
Yeah.
Right. You're not moving your arm completely away because if you move your arm away, that lapel gets exposed. So you turn your body to take the sleeve away from the person, and then when they go to that lapel, you parry that hand.
Right.
Right. So it's a very nuanced motion of moving away, parrying, right? While the thumb is still attached to the outside of your lapel. And it's very easy to coordinate because you know where that opponent's hand is coming. And the entire time you're shooting for that sleeve, stabbing that hand in, shooting for that sleeve, looking for your hand on the lapel, right? And once you get it, you go into the series of over the back, Ippon Seinagi snap down, over the back, Ippon Seinagi snap down, all while still cognizant that the person might try to grab that lapel and you're still parrying this hand. So there's a lot going on there,
mm-hmm.
right? But once you get good at this, you could automate all of it,
mm-hmm.
right? So like I know guys who do this in their sleep.
Yeah, for sure. If I have that far lapel with my left hand and then I get my power grip with my right hand, so now I've got I've got your lapel and I've got my hand over your back. Did you say that sometimes you transition from the collar down to the sleeve now?
Yes. So my left hand going to go over the shoulder, right? If you could imagine my forefinger on the lapel, I rotate my fingers upward,
right?
And then I slide the hand over the shoulder because I don't want to let go and go underneath because then that right hand might go over my back. And now we're in the same exact position.
Yeah.
So I want to be going over the shoulder to prevent that hand from coming over my body and then control that sleeve.
Yeah. And then the left hand will slide down from the first grip we made, right? On the collar. That slides down to the sleeve.
So that's the hand that slides down. If I have my right hand on the collar behind, I'm going to keep it there because that's already my goal.
Yes. The other one slides to the sleeve.
Yes.
Do you find that difficult to make that sleeve grip because you have a grip on the collar and tracking down the sleeve from the collar? Is there any things to think about when you're making that grip? Or is it usually pretty easy because you've already secured your right hand behind their head?
So this is the thing. If you're moving your arm like crazy, right? For me to let go of that left lapel and try to grab your sleeve while your hand is moving, it's freaking impossible,
Yeah.
But if I could take that hand on the lapel and if I could put my 3 fingers on the top of your shoulder, and then if I slide it down that arm, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Are you looking to make that top grip on top of the elbow? Is that sort of the grip you would transition to most likely, or is it kind of whatever you can get?
Mostly down to the elbow because right now, if I have it already there, I already control your posture, and then I'm probably going to go into throwing position. Transitioning all the way down to the low sleeve might be a little bit more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing.
Yeah. Do you use a lot of armpit grips? I know some judokas use that, but it's not a grip that I see talked about too often.
Armpit grip. So if you're like fighting someone your body weight and you feel more comfortable being sort of locked in 50-50, and then, you want to maximize your turn throws, yes, that's good. It's also good for defense because you post it on that lapel, on the armpit. It's hard to get rid of. And then you have a nice strong frame, right, against their upper body, closing the distance. I don't like to use it so much. And I kind of developed my judo system over the years, in the last few years especially, to fight in a very safe way because I am getting a little bit older, racking up injuries, and I'm thinking about the longevity of my, being able to do judo with my athletes, right?
Yeah. No, I hear you.
So I take a little bit more of a hand fighting, positional advantage sort of a style.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, it was a little bit different. I would lock up 50-50 and just rip and roar, and then try to develop my judo in that way, just throwing power, right? Put two hands on, 50-50, locked in there, go, go, go. And that's good, but there's a lot of risks that come with that, and you can't really do that forever because then all of a sudden, when your athletic abilities decline, you're not as strong, you're not as fast, all of a sudden, you've developed your entire system around this ability, right? That relies on your athleticism. And now all of a sudden it's gone, right? So little by little, I'm kind of getting away from that. And that's sort of the reason why I don't do the armpit grip as much. But if I do get out gripped or something and you have good control over my posture, then I think the next best thing that I can do is create that post in the armpit grip. But it's not my go to, nor is it my preference to do that.
Cool. I mean, that was a very comprehensive, detailed, gripping conversation. I'm sure some people are going to be a little bit lost in some of it. That's why I recommend you guys check out Shintaro's YouTube channel and some of his instructionals because, it's really helped me. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss on grips, Shintaro? Anything you think that jiu-jitsu practitioners should know that we didn't really talk about? I know there's tons of information we didn't go over, but like glaring, obvious knowledge or points that shouldn't be overlooked for the common jiu-jitsu fighter?
Yeah, I think the shifting a little bit away from the turn throws for jiu-jitsu athletes is important. Working arm drags and leg grabs and sumi and tomonage, I think those are like some of the major, major techniques that, people should learn. And I think more people should have crossover knowledge, right? Like if a jiu-jitsu guy walked into a judo school, like I want to learn judo because I do BJJ, the judo guys would be like, all right, I'm going to show you this Osotogari, or let me show you this Ippon Senagi. It's amazing, and that's really not going to help you if you can't integrate it into your system,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the grip fighting strategies that you may have in judo, period, might not cross over for BJJ as well. So it really takes a good instructor with sort of crossover knowledge to be able to sort of cross that bridge or bridge that gap, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important. I know you're talking about grips. Here's something for you too, I think is good advice across the board that I like to give to people. And this is very applicable to you because it's mental models, right? That's the name of your podcast, and it's audio only.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to visualize this stuff is really, really important, and when people think about visualizing technique or applying a technique, they generally do it from a third person standpoint, like trying to see two figures throwing, right? Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
From a third person standpoint. But it's very important when you're doing this grip fighting stuff to be able to visualize yourself from a third person standpoint and a first person standpoint, as if you were playing a first person shooter game,
Mm-hmm.
right? So seeing the person in the stance in front of you, and then my right hand can't back at the lapel, and seeing the opponent's body, what their body is going to be doing, what their potential reactions are, and visualizing that can really, really help you improve your game. So if you could do third person and first person visualization of all this stuff alongside having the terminology, because without the terminology, you can't really explain the concepts, right? You don't really have a full grasp of the concepts, right? It's like, oh, I can kind of, right? So learning that terminology first, right? First, right, sleeve hand, right? Option one, option B, right? Something of this nature, and being able to see it third person, see it one person, first person, and then take it through all the different potential lines can extremely, extremely be beneficial, especially if you're sitting at home and trying to do martial arts study. Because then when you get into the gym, you could recognize it when you're watching two people do jujitsu or judo, whatever, right? And now all of a sudden you're doing it and trying to implement it, and then you're facing the person, and it's very familiar because you've already done this in your head.
Yeah, makes total sense.
So I think that's a very, very beneficial thing that you could definitely, for me to to your listeners. Yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Nice. Great advice. Before we wrap it up, I sometimes do like a quick fire question thing for the guests. I have a few questions, if you don't mind. And basically, they're just intended to be shorter answers if you're cool with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. When did you stop competing?
Probably around 2016-ish. That was my last tournament. Yeah.
Would you ever compete again?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're right up. I actually just got a call from the U.S. Sambo Federation. They said, hey, you want to compete in the Worlds in Sambo? If you want it, it's yours, because I know the guy who runs U.S. Sambo. But I haven't been training for 8 months, so it would be a shame for me to take someone else's spot,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you get one person per slot. But I'll definitely compete again. But it has to be right. I don't want to take the unnecessary risk of going out there and getting injured, and I want to be able to play with my kid. And my lifestyle is teaching judo, right? So if I, get heel hooked to jujitsu or something and blow my knee out, then I'm not going to be able to teach judo or jujitsu, which is sort of my livelihood. No, so if something comes up that's very compelling, like for instance, I don't know, US Judo is doing this thing, and maybe there's a potential for, making a team or something, then maybe.
Is there a grappling art that you wouldn't compete in? Like, would you ever compete in BJJ?
Yeah, I've competed in BJJ before. I think I did 2 tournaments. I won them.
Would you do it again?
Potentially, yeah, maybe. But if I do it, I want to be training BJJ too, right? Because my jiu-jitsu belt is kind of honorary almost,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I walked into a jiu-jitsu school when I was younger, and they gave me a blue belt on the second day because I did a lot of groundwork,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I trained for a summer at Henzo's in Donaher's class, and he gave me a purple belt at the end of the summer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like that. So I've never really had extensive jiu-jitsu BJJ training. One of my training partners this guy, Brian Glick,
Yep.
you know him?
I don't know him, but I've definitely heard about him a lot.
He's unbelievable, man. He's actually one of the best kept secrets in BJJ.
That's what I've heard.
He was one of Donaher's students. He rolls with Gordon and Gary, and he's in the blue basement. And he's one of the most knowledgeable people in the game. And I'm telling you, like, he's, I don't want to say the next Donaher or anything like this, but to me, man, Glick is the best, and he has a very strong affinity to judo and standing arts. So, we get together every now and then, and I'll teach him judo and he'll teach me jujitsu. And then we'll do like 30 minutes on our feet and then 30 minutes on the ground. And it's really one of the most beneficial learning experience for me and him both, right? And we have a good friendly relationship as well.
Cool.
I would have to really pick up my training and, get on the level of, some of these guys before I could really put myself out there, put my name out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's also disrespectful and arrogant for me to say like, oh, I could do this, and I don't even train in this stuff, you know? So it's very mental for me. I've always had that. If I went into a tournament and I was ill prepared, it would be a nagging thing even while I was competing, right? Ah, man, I didn't really fully prepare for this thing.
Yeah.
I don't really belong here and deserve to be here, So if I compete in it, I'd want to be super prepared. And I don't think I have the time to do that right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, but one day, yeah, maybe.
Cool. What is your favorite grappling style to watch?
I have to, this is going to sound really bad, but I don't really watch grappling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I actually don't even watch MMA that much either.
Yeah, I don't either.
I'll do like highlights every now and then. Like a YouTube will make a suggestion, and I'll click on it and watch it and be like, yeah, that's good. That's cool. Right. But I like to come up with my own things. And I used to, obsessively watch judo as a younger athlete. And it almost always created certain biases for me, right? And somebody would say something in an instructional video, and I would hang on to it. And I could never break outside of that because, I would have this tunnel vision of like, this guy said I have to stand like that, or that guy said I have to do it like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very difficult for me to break through. So I don't want to say like pollute my mind, but I don't want to create biases for myself when I'm thinking about martial arts on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about martial arts a lot.
Yeah.
So I hate to say I don't watch it that much. I probably watch it more than I think I do.
Yeah. If you had to watch grappling, let's say, like what would be your, would it be like an ADCC? Would it be IJF? What would be your go-to if you had to pick?
That's tough to say. The Hungary, IJF did the Hungary Grand Slam, which is the first judo event in a very long time. And all the stars came out. And I probably watched maybe 20 minutes of highlights. That was it.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes when the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu worlds come out, I'll watch the highlights from that. And let me tell you something, man. There's a lot of judo throw, like a lot of throwing and takedowns in those highlights too.
Yeah.
Which really does me no good. I'm like watching it. I'm like, yeah, that was a great throw, but I'm not.
You're not seeing the jiu-jitsu as much.
Yeah, yeah. I'll watch like sometimes whenever, like for instance, when Gordon did the thing with the wrestler. What was that guy's name?
Bo Nickel.
Yeah, Bo Nichols. I was very interested in that, but I already knew going into it, these rule sets are really dumb. So,
Yeah.
like I just,
Yeah, the crossover matches are kind of like, I guess they're kind of bridging the two worlds, or they're trying to, but at the end of the day, it's like, what are we really doing here?
honestly, God bless them for trying,
Yeah.
and I'm very excited that even happened. But Bo Nichols is going to win the wrestling match and Gordon's going to win the jiu-jitsu match. That's without a doubt.
Oh, that one. I think you're talking about Pat Downey. That they did a.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that one. That one was like, of course that guy's going to win in wrestling.
Yeah.
Of course Gordon's going to submit him.
Yeah, and well,
You know what I
the
mean?
funny thing about that match was Gordon just had like a power lock on him, just had it like a shoulder control, and you could tell Gordon could have. He was like intentionally not submitting him. Like he could have easily choked him out
Yeah,
when he was on the back. And he was like
yeah,
intentionally not, maybe he was trying to weaken him because he knew later on he had to wrestle this guy.
yeah.
And then later on during the, Pat Downey actually submitted it wasn't even a submission. Even Gordon was like, when they called the match,
Yeah, I saw
Gordon
that.
was like not letting it go because he's like, it wasn't even a submission. Like he was intentionally not submitting the guy.
Yeah.
And Pat was just like exhausted. He's like, enough of this. I'm done.
You know what it is, man? I think because you're not allowed to figure four the body in wrestling. So once he got figure forward and he was on all fours and Gordon tipped his body over to the side to take him back down, I think the fear of Pat blowing his knees out, right?
Yeah.
Because it was such an unfamiliar sort of movement, that sort of kind of freaked him out. And then when the power half was on and the body triangle was on, he's like, yeah, you know what? This is definitely not worth it for me to get messed up here.
Yeah.
I'm a wrestler by trade. This is an exhibition match for fun.
Yeah.
I'm not risking this. He's like, I'm done.
Yeah.
So I completely get it. And I think that's his right move, that he makes his living wrestling. And even with the Bo Nichols thing, so there's a part of me that was like, okay, if this guy he's very good at wrestling, could he have taken and put Gordon on his head, when he did that suplex?
Yeah.
He could have, but he didn't.
And was he being safe with him?
He was being safe with him. So it's like, there's a lot of issues there, I think. But I'm just happy that it happened.
Yeah. It's kind of cool to see.
I'm very happy that it happened. Yeah. So that was fun. To answer your question, I will watch grappling, but probably it's so hard to pick a favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy a lot of, even like Sambo when they do their highlights, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll watch some freestyle wrestling when the freestyle worlds happen, but I just can't really watch that much grappling.
Yeah, I hear you.
But then again, I don't watch football, basketball, baseball. I don't watch any sports.
Yeah, neither do I actually. What's your favorite part about being an instructor?
Ooh, that's a good one. Favorite part about being an instructor? I don't know, man. It feels good to gain all this knowledge and to teach it. It gives me sort of validation that people want to learn it, which is kind of nice. I spent so much time doing it and learning it that when someone cares enough about it to seek out the knowledge that I have, it makes me feel like, oh man, like it makes me feel good, and when we get into sort of the benefits of judo and jiu-jitsu and any sort of grappling, what it could do for the human, right? As a person, I could inspire them and help them and, make them feel good about themselves. And in return, I get inspiration back by seeing them at their phase, whether it was yellow belt or green belt, overcoming certain issues. And, I had to overcome those things too, right?
Mm-hmm.
At some point in my career. So it's a reminder of how I grew up with my dad and training and fighting. So it's kind of a beautiful thing, man. It takes me back. A lot of inspiration, going both ways. People making good friendships, all that stuff. And, having access also is, having a gym, having a slew of people that are, red and blue and, opposite side of the political spectrum and different types of people coming together, learning. It's just a great feel.
Awesome. Do you have like a favorite combo, like a standing attack that served you well over the years?
Yeah, I really like my fake step for the turn throw, right? If you have a good turn throw, you could fake that turn throw and then create tons of reactions. And once you're able to juke them and fake them, then you see what they're thinking, right? You can see by their reaction how much they fear your turn throw, and you could base your skill set, your next attacks on that. And it's sort of one of my thing, like fight for position, dominate, fake a turn throw, and then chaining 2 or 3 techniques after that sort of is my favorite thing because it makes me feel really smart. It's like, oh, I'm 5 steps ahead of you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even though it's not as sophisticated as I make it seem. But it's one of my favorite things.
I like that fake step you do. It's something that I'm trying to use in my game. I still haven't quite figured it out yet, but it's cool for sure. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, quick step, boom.
Yeah. Do you do leg locks?
A little bit. Yeah, so when I train with my guy Brian Glick, I've said, hey man, you got to teach me some of this leg lock stuff. It's really cool. I know the basics. And then, we'll go sometimes doing leg locks and stuff like that. And I'm sure when we train, me and him, it's very boring for him to do the leg locks as my knowledge of it is not that good.
Mm-hmm.
But I do some of it, and I think there's I like how it's progressed over the last 5 years, this whole leg lock game, and how there was a guy who really took an interest in it. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really, really cool.
What about Barambolos?
I do a little berimbolo, but I'm a much heavier guy, so I don't really try to do the inversion so much. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually like being on top,
Yeah.
but I try it. I like berimbolos. I'll do it. I'll try it. I'll go for sumigaeshi to the inside sankaku, leg lacing stuff.
Yep.
I'll do that. All things grappling, I love it. And when I see a little bit of it, I'll always try it. Like I'm trying to refine my floating pass situation,
Yeah.
when as opposed to just being a pressure passing. And I do a little bit of the quick sidestep, Toriander and
Mm-hmm.
X pass situation, but I want to develop a lunge forward and do a floating pass. I haven't quite figured it out yet.
Are you talking about what Gordon's doing? Is that the sort of floating pass you're talking about?
I don't. Is that one of his skills that he does?
Yeah, but he's a no-gi fighter, right? So I don't know how applicable it
Yeah.
is to the training you're doing. I find in the gi doing the floating passing is difficult because just a simple collar grip can create kazushi, right? Whereas in no-gi they don't really have that ability.
Yes. 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 Yeah, you're right about that. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
See, I'm learning something today. That's amazing.
Hey, you and me both. Like when I watched Gordon's DVD, I tried to use it in the gi, and then I realized like
Yeah.
goddamn, every time I get here, that my opponent off balances me, and I have to put hands on the floor. So it's almost smarter to
Yeah.
stay low and sort of keep your head over their hips rather than bring your head over their head, which is what Gordon does in no-gi, right?
But don't you, when you do the floating pass, put hands on the floor? You're starting with your hands on the floor.
Yeah, but your opponent, because your hands are on the floor, if your opponent has like a pant grip and a collar grip,
Yeah.
like that pant grip is so powerful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In
Oh,
no-gi,
yeah.
no-gi you don't have that. So you could totally, like, if your opponent steps inside into the headquarters position, they have one leg in and you're on the bottom. If it's no-gi, this is not a good position, really. Like you're kind of on the defense. This is where Gordon funnels his passes towards. But in the gi,
Yeah.
if you have the pants and you have the collar, man, you can go right to De La Hiva. You can elevate
Yeah,
from there,
true.
and because you're controlling the
Yeah.
pants by proxy, there's no, it's hard to break that grip.
Yeah.
So,
What do you think about the knee reaping situation for the IBJJF?
well, I mean,
They're allowing it,
yeah,
right?
they're only doing it for no-gi, which is, I think, disappointing. I would love to see it
I
in the
thought they were
gi.
gonna do it in gi. I thought they were gonna allow it in gi.
No. There was a meme where it was a guy heel hooking a guy in the gi when the news came out. But as far as I know, it's brown and black level, and it's no gi only. So
I thought they were gonna do it in the gi. Am I mistaken? Is that a rumor?
I think you are mistaken, unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh, I read that somewhere, or someone was talking about like, hey, did you hear IBJJF is allowing knee reaping for gi?
I don't think so, but I think they should. I mean, I think that at the black belt level, at least in the gi, you should be able to heel hook people. And there's a ton of systems that haven't even been worked out, using like a spider guard into a, like all these open guards in the gi game. If you allow them to do reaping and heel hooks, a lot of them change.
Yes,
you have to be very careful about how you expose the ashigarami now. So
yeah, that's
but
true.
as far as I know, it is no gi.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Almost done here. Do you have any big injuries?
I had a lot of smaller ones. I had I dislocated both elbows. I dislocated a shoulder. I had articular cartilage and meniscus in my left knee. And I broke my foot. I have bone fusion in my right ankle. I had a couple concussions. I broke a rib, but none of them were like catastrophic, right? None of them are like I tore my ACL and I couldn't walk for whatever it is, and I did surgery. I broke my nose and I had to get it fixed. Just a bunch of little ones, I think. I think the concussions are the ones that sort of the ones I fear the most. I had like three or four good ones, and I'm at a point where I'm like, man, I really, really don't want another concussion, and it's something that will prevent me from competing in like the IJF. Like if U.S. Judo called me tomorrow and was like, hey, man, you want to go to this Grand Slam? That the first thing I would think is like, man, do I really want to risk getting another concussion? Like, I know that's the wrong mindset, but I have a kid now, so it's like I have to really take that into account. And
Yeah. I know a few people who have concussions and they say it's by far the worst injury they've ever had, and one of the guys
yeah,
has had an ACL replacement. So he's saying the concussion is actually worse just because your mind state is like it's not in a good place when it's really bad, right?
definitely, man. And you get confused, you forget where you were going.
Nauseous and all and
You
whatnot.
misplace stuff, nauseous, and then you just get anxious sometimes. You forget what day it is or what week it is.
Yeah.
I had one bad one when I competed in Chile and I got thrown on my head and I was out of life for like a month. Like I had to take myself out of life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'd walk to the store and I would be like, oh shoot, what was I at the store for? It's like, man, what day of the week is it? Like, oh my God, like I don't even know what year is it, you know? And then I would get anxious, like, oh my God, like I gotta look at my phone or something
Yeah.
and then be like, oh shoot, it's freaking July, it's a Tuesday. I probably have to go to the dojo in a little bit. What did I come? Like it was very scary, It's like you having dementia or early onset Alzheimer's or something. So definitely don't want to get another one.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, I got one more question for you.
Perfect.
Do you wake up sore every day?
No, I mean, depends on what I did the night before. Like did I lift? I've been lifting a lot during this pandemic. The gyms have been open for like 2 months now, so I've been lifting pretty heavy.
Nice.
I definitely woke up sore today. I bought this fitness vest that you could load it with plates.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I did a lot of heavy dips and I did heavy lunges. I had 50 pound to 100 pounds loaded on plates, and I'm definitely sore from that.
But like day to day randori, when you are doing randori, I don't know if you're doing it every day or whatever, but when you're training full time, are you generally like sore or
Oh yeah, yeah. Like not maybe not DOMS like muscle pain all the time, muscle soreness, but like elbow hurting. I wake up and my knees aching. My back feels funny today. It's generally some sort of pain every day if I'm grappling all the time.
yeah, makes sense. Cool.
Yeah, you know this.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
always sore. But that was an awesome discussion. I really appreciate you taking the time to share some of your knowledge, especially in the gripping aspect. If there's nothing else you'd like to add, how can the folks reach you? How can they follow you? Any instructionals you want to push?
Yeah, so I have Judo Fanatics, BJJ Fanatics video series. You guys could follow me on YouTube. I have close to 70,000 subscribers, and most of the stuff I put out is free. And I put out tons of stuff, 3 or 4 times a week. So you could have a backlog of like 300 videos. You guys can check that out. You can find me on Instagram. Shintaro Higashi there's not too many of me. So if you type in Shintaro Higashi, you'll be able to find me. Yeah, please reach out. Tons of people already ask me questions. I can't get back to everybody, but people do ask. So yeah, if you catch me at the right time, I will respond and all that stuff. So, and thank you for having me, man. It was so hard to coordinate with you, right?
I
Because
know, yeah, we had some
I have a
issues
kid,
there.
you're busy, and then all this stuff. But I'm glad we were able to make it happen.
Oh, me too. This is a huge pleasure for me. And, I've had people in the BJJ community message me about you actually. And I know a lot of people are looking forward to this episode. So
Awesome.
it is really exciting. And again, I just wanted to, reconfirm what Shintaro was saying about his YouTube channel. It's been a huge resource for me. It's probably my favorite judo channel, and just tons of information, especially if anyone can go to the gym and practice throws. But if you don't have that context, if you don't know what combos and sort of, how you're standing and little details that he shows when he's gripping, it's a great resource. So I really appreciate that, Shintaro, and would love to have you back anytime. And I do hope the best for you in your reopening and
Thank you.
with just the general well-being of New York moving forward. I hope everything goes okay with you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, just want to shout out to the patrons. Thank you very much for supporting the show. You guys are what keeps the lights on. You can go to www.patreon.com/BJJ Mental Models to support. That is the best way you can support the show. Shintaro, thank you so much for coming on. And if there's nothing else you'd like to add, I hope you have a great day and good luck moving forward.
Yep, that's it.
All right, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.